Andy Muschietti's The Flash, the superhero epic comic book film that basically just came out. I am still a little late, I think, with this spoiler review because, as you know, I am me, and I love to just put out stuff that's sort of not on time. And also, these movie reviews don't get a lot of views, but I figured I had to make the exception for this film because this film marks the end, essentially, of Zack Snyder's DC Extended Universe movie franchise world. As far as I know, this film was the last. Blue Beetle and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, later this year, will serve as slight prequels, I believe, to James Gunn's DC universe. Obviously, Superman Legacy in 2025 is the first chapter of that universe. But until then, I mean, that is that. But right now, we got The Flash, and this is the end for the universe that I truly cared about. The universe that I was invested in. Zack Snyder's universe of DC characters and DC stories is just the epitome of comic book storytelling for me in when it comes to the cinematic medium. So this is kind of sad for me. And it's even more sad because The Flash is not that great. Yeah, that's right. I said it, okay? I don't know what a lot of reviewers are saying. I think the majority of them are saying that it's a decent film, it's enjoyable, and I think the critic score is decent. The audience review score is considerably higher than the critic score. I mean, that makes sense. For me, watching this film, I was looking forward to it. I mean, well, actually, that's not true. I was not looking forward to it. I was neutral. Because unfortunately, I do have Twitter, and a lot of shit was spoiled for me, but it was just, certain things that appeared. I mean, this is a spoiler review, okay? So screw it. We'll get to those things that were spoiled for me, because they are connected to, certain plot points of the film. Let's start with the most important aspect of the film, of course, which is Ezra Miller's portrayal of The Flash. As you know, I loved Ezra Miller's performance of The Flash in Zack Snyder's Justice League. I just thought they were brilliant, they were funny, they were quirky. A lot of people were kind of a little bit turned off with the quirkiness and with, it sort of seemed like another portrayal of Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor in many ways, right? But I thoroughly enjoyed it. As far as I understand, when I've seen The Flash be portrayed in animated films, he's not as quirky. He's not so jokey and so kind of jittery, but in Zack Snyder's world, Zack Snyder's universe, Ezra Miller, that's the way that they portray the Flash. And it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, a dude who is sort of all over the place when it comes to time, and I love the fact that he's always late. That's so interesting. Obviously, he's got to be late. Of course, the fastest man alive has to be late, all the time. So that's great, and it makes sense that he's anxious all the time, and that he's hungry all the time, and there's always something, because his mind is going, a million miles a second. So I think that all of those aspects of the character, physically, right, and metaphorically, go in line with Ezra Miller's portrayal of the Flash. And we see that here in Andy Muschietti's film. And so, if you're turned off by that, you're probably not going to enjoy Ezra Miller's performance here either. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was great. And obviously, we've seen it in the trailers. We have the doppelganger of Barry Allen. The present-day Barry Allen, of course, travels back in time, and he ends up fucking shit up, of course, by doing that, and he ends up running into his older, that past version of him, right? And so the whole film, just has them kind of going back and forth, which is, honestly, I think it's brilliant. I think it fits. I love how they both go through character development through their interactions as the film goes on and as the events unfold. And they were both really trying to save each other in terms of not wanting them to deal with consequences, the very things that Barry Allen, is made of, which is the death of their mother, right? Like, that is the sort of their Uncle Ben, right? The Bruce Wayne's parents, of the Flash, right, is their mother. And so they're both trying to save each other from that. And they learn from each other from that, and they develop, and they also make mistakes because of those things, of their desires to save each other. So I just thought it was brilliant. And of course, they're both very funny. One of them is more, hyper than the other. And that serves as a great balance because one is a little bit more mature than the other. So that's wonderful. I thought it was great. I had a fun time seeing both of their interactions. Next point, the humor. The humor's fine. I mean, it's The Flash. It's a Flash film. I expect to see humor, and I thought it was mostly funny. Some things were a little cringy here and there, but overall, I think the film is rather funny. In fact, the points where I think the film is not that funny is with Michael Keaton's Batman. And as you'll find as I keep talking about the film, Michael Keaton is the least interesting aspect for me when it comes to the film. I just don't have that nostalgic connection. I'm 24 years old. I didn't grow up watching, I didn't go watch Batman 89 in the theaters, okay? I remember watching that film when I was a kid, 100%, but I just don't have that connection as much as I do with like Henry Cavill or Ben Affleck as Batman. As crazy as that may sound, but it's true. So it is what it is. I actually thought the comedic aspects of that character to me was just not that funny. I love Michael Keaton and I like the portrayal. I think it's decent. I think it's fine, but I just that's where the humor just kind of I didn't really care for. Let's get nuts. Or you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. I don't care. Is that a reference to one of his previous films? I'm not sure. I just didn't really care. So that's really where the humor didn't really land for me. Everything else sort of landed for the most part. And in many ways, I think Supergirl's reaction to a lot of the humor from Ezra Miller, I think, is kind of brilliant. Just because she is, like, in many ways, the person that's always cringing. And I thought that was interesting. And also, I have to mention that when the film got serious, it respected its seriousness. It didn't feel like it was trying to shoehorn comedy when it was trying to be serious, which I enjoyed. And I admire that because other films don't tend to do that. Now, let's get into the other elephant in the room besides Ezra Miller, which I've already talked about, the CGI. Okay, look, I'm conflicted, okay? Part of me throughout the film was heavily disgusted. I mean, that shit looked like almost a PlayStation 3 game. Or like, I mean, it got to the point almost where I was like, this is bad. And especially, it was really weird when you would see Ezra Miller's doppelganger, his other past self. You would immediately tell which one is CGI'd and the other one, and which one is actually Ezra Miller. That was kind of distracting. I just don't know how they released this film when seeing that. I mean, I haven't really seen a lot of, like, twin movies, where like you have two characters sort of look the same and technology is being utilized. I haven't really seen a lot of those films, so I can't really say, but I've heard from other people and other reviewers that there have been times in other films where it looks so much better, and there's no exception as to why this $200+ million film would not get this technology right and this aspect of the film right. And they totally, I mean, it just, for the most part, you could just tell. There's sometimes where it's done very well, because they're filming separately and you could tell. And then there's times where you have to have them both together in the same scene, in the same shot, and you could tell which one is the fake one and the other one is real. And it's very distracting. I'm like, dude, like, really? Like, you can't get this right, And it just, look, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a visual effects editor, so I don't know how hard it is, but apparently other films have done it better. You gotta work around it. If you can't film twice, like don't have a shot with them in the same room, I don't care. We understand that they're the same person and we necessarily can't see them in the same shot together. But even then, it's possible to do those shots. People do that nowadays with normal fucking, shorts on TikTok and on YouTube for comedic purposes. They're in one part of the room and then that same person is in another part of the room, and it's like, you can definitely do it. It just takes a lot of finessing. But, whatever. I mean, again, the parts where they're filmed separately, it's brilliant. I mean, I think the acting is great or whatnot, but the CGI aspect of it, when they're both in the same shot, you can definitely tell, and it's very jarring. But everything else, of course, the other aspects of the film, the CGI, oh my God. I mean, look, I go back and forth because, yes, the director did confirm, I don't know, he just exclaimed that part of like this bad CGI that some people are referencing is intentional. That in a world where, you know, you're the Flash, you know, you're going around, you know, as quick as you are, the worlds will sort of seem that way to you. So when I listen to that, when I've read that, I understand that it makes sense. And, you know, I in many ways, I do understand the sort of video gamey aesthetic, right, to CGI in a movie. Like, it can fit. I understand. Like, it can look cool. You know, everything else looks jarring. And even the Flash's suit, sometimes it looks a little weird and too plasticky and too CGI, you know, but I understand. I mean, but it's, it does make me think of like, oh my God, look at Man of Steel. Like, look at Zack Snyder's Justice League. And even then, Zack Snyder's Justice League occasionally, like, 5% of it, 10% of it had, you know, some weird CGI here and there. But overall, I mean, it's incredible, right? And especially Man of Steel, you know, because a lot of aspects of Man of Steel are in this Flash movie, specifically the Kryptonians, right? But my God, just the vast difference, you know, between the two, it really makes me be like, God, like, they totally just don't, it's not as good. It just isn't. But again, I go back and forth with the aesthetic, and I understand that, you know, being that you're the Flash, you know, maybe they were trying to be unique with the film. They wanted to give the film identity through their CGI, but when they did that, I think they ran the risk of just being too video gamey with its CGI and just too fake, you know, like too gross. And you see that a lot with the action sequences in the latter half of the film, you know, where it's just like, oh my God, this is horrendous. And it's like, it's just too much. It's too fake. I mean, come on, try. You know what I mean? It literally looks like the stereotypical bad green screen CGI, you know, but you know what? It's not even that offensive. It's even more offensive in the sense of it is the most stereotypical bad, high budget CGI green screen nonsense. That is what it is. It's not even like a dude in his room putting a fucking green screen behind him and having, you know, shitty ass effects. It's not even that, because we understand that. This is a high budget film, and it is high budget green screen blech. That is what that is, and that's even worse. And I get that a lot. That's what I got a lot of in the film in the latter half of it. I mean, it's just, oh man, it's kind of bad. It is. But again, I understand the aesthetic that they were going for, specifically with the beginning sequence of the film. It is very, you know, live action / animated. Like it has this interesting balance, and you know, there's babies in the beginning sequence of the film where the Flash is saving babies, and the babies look so fucking weird occasionally. I don't know. It's kind of goofy. Like it kind of fits in with the Flash, right? And again, when he's moving that quickly, I understand how things can get distorted in a way realistically. But also, my girlfriend was like, well, you know, you never know. It just might be an artist trying to never admit that it was shitty CGI. So I don't know. I truly don't know. I mean, we'd have to somehow be a fly on the wall, you know, with Andy Muschietti talking about the CGI with his team, or we just have to give him the benefit of the doubt. Or again, I just think that it does end up, I can't deny that it does end up looking a little fucked up towards the very end. It totally has this thing of like a Marvel film. It was like Black Panther. I don't think Black Panther's CGI was very good. I mean, it's pretty bad because it's just too fake. It's just too much. You know what I mean? Like they're going all out, you know, with the fakeness of it. And I understand that the Flash and Black Panther are both films and you know, their stories and their characters. It's difficult to do live action. I get it, you know, but like, God, I mean, in many ways, like Zack Snyder did it. But again, you know, he wasn't doing these intense, you know, long action sequences that you can do these great, you know, Flash sequences of in live action, as live action as you can possibly make it, and have it look cool and blend in perfectly with the CGI and not have it look weird, but in very small increments, like in Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you're going to have a movie that relies solely on that, you're going to have to, you know, you just can't put that much effort and money into these sequences, or else you're going to fucking go bankrupt. So you have to resort to CGI, and the suit being CGI and all this. So we get it. I get it. I get it. But still, I can't deny it looks a little shitty for the most part. God, but I still can't. I think, and this is actually, now that I think about it, the point that I was trying to make with the Marvel comparison is that when you look at Zack Snyder's films, they look real. Like it looks like it was shot on location, even though a lot of it is CGI. But it looks so real, it looks so good. And maybe it doesn't even look real. It's just the aesthetic is just much more palpable. You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of these, you know, like when you think of Thor Ragnarok, for example, like oh my God, that is just fake. That's all, like, it's just, but it's fake in a bad way to me. You know, it's just kind of like, you know, and I look at that aesthetic and that's what I kind of see in The Flash. It's like just bright, colorful, very saturated, and it really like makes things look even more fake and just more meaningless in many ways. You know, there's no like identity. The closest thing to the film having a visual identity is the fact of how goofy its CGI is sometimes. For me, it didn't really hit it that much because it just ends up falling short, you know? So, God, I'm going way too much into the CGI thing, but I think it's very important because in many ways, maybe for Andy Muschietti, this CGI aspect to the film was an important aspect to the film's identity. But that was also inevitably a thing that some people didn't really like, you know, as I didn't. So it just sucks because it, you know, if that was going to be the hill you were going to die on and have CGI be a really important visual aspect to your film, if you're going to die on that hill and make the CGI part of the film's aesthetic, like a part of the film, like Watchmen, right? Like that film in Zack Snyder's style, like it calls out to you. It's like, this is an important aspect of the film. This is a defining aspect of the film. And so if that's the hill you're going to die on with the Flash, the CGI in the Flash, I mean, it's like, God, I mean, it better be good. And in this case, it just fell short.
If you thought The Flash had bad CGI, I can tell you why, because I worked on the movie. In the past couple of years, it seems like there's been an increase in the amount of complaints about bad CGI in superhero movies. And there's a good reason for this. I mean, well, it's not good, but you'll see what I mean. The way that VFX companies get work is that Marvel and Warner Brothers and other studios will approach VFX companies and say, hey, I have 2,000 shots that I need for this sequence. And the VFX studios will place a bid based on that quantity of shots. But here's the catch. The amount of work per shot varies dramatically. So one shot could have a wire removal, another shot could have wire removal, smoke sim, fire sim, face replacement, green screen. Despite the difference in workload between those two shots, they both are considered just one shot each. Because of this, VFX artists are forced to work relentless hours, overtime almost every day, including weekends. In fact, I had to be the one to call artists on a Friday night to say, hey, can you work over the weekend? Which is part of the reason why I left after 3 months. But here's the kicker. If these VFX companies aren't meeting the unrealistic expectations that these studios are setting, they risk losing out on future contracts. And there's only so many studios that are making superhero movies anymore. Which means the VFX companies have to bend over backwards to hit these insane deadlines from these Hollywood studios. Then if you look at movies like Avatar that took 10 years to work on the technology just to develop the VFX that looked this amazing, you might think the takeaway from the studios would be, well, if we spend more time working on the VFX, they might actually look good, right? Let me fill you in on a little secret. Movie studios don't care about good CGI. They just don't. The only thing they care about is pleasing their shareholders on the next earnings call. To them, they've managed to increase the output of superhero movies that are still making billions of dollars, and they've reduced the time it takes to make them. Studios could easily space out their projects to give these super talented and hardworking artists more time to work on the film, but that's just not in the best interest of the shareholders. Instead, they increase the pressure on these artists to deliver faster and faster results. No pun intended. When you're putting out this many projects with shorter turnarounds, the VFX will always look worse. So if it looks like a VFX shot in The Flash was made in a week, it's probably because it was.
Now, let's move on to the story. This is where it kills me at the end of the day. Honestly, bad CGI, I can live with. I can totally live with. And maybe I could have lived with other things that I'm going to talk about later as well. But I ultimately did not enjoy the story in this film, okay? You know why I didn't enjoy it? Because for like fucking 2 hours and 15 minutes or whatever it was, I was enjoying the story so much, especially in the second act, when it becomes this sort of investigative thing, this mystery thing. It's like an onion, and we're peeling, and it's like, you know, in many ways, The Flash being a forensic scientist, I mean, it just fits so well with the narrative of the film. It feels very investigative. It feels very fucking scientific methody. You know what I mean? Like, it's great. I love it. The problem is that the fucking last thing of the last plot point of the film totally derails and totally just destroys the very mission and the very moral of what the story is trying to tell you and what the story is trying to do. The whole fucking film is basically a metaphor and it's a moral of the story of like, stop fucking living in the past or living in the future. Just focus on the present. to make your past and your future better is you focus on the present, you accept things, you let things go, you move on, and you get better, and you better yourself, and you understand yourself and understand the world, and that's it. You don't fuck with things, and you don't live in the past, you don't live in the future, you live in the present, and you accept things, and this sort of mature, wise way of looking at things. That is the story of the film. That's the metaphor that the story is trying to do. That is the lesson that these characters in The Flash are trying to learn. And it's all going gravy, and the Flash is understanding the consequences of him going back in fucking time all so often. So the Flash, after, fucking an hour and 45, whatever, right? He goes back in time again, and he finally does the thing that he needed to do. He gets those tomatoes, the canned tomatoes that he put originally in his mom's shopping cart to save his mom. He puts them back on the shelf, but he puts it back on the shelf, and which, by the way, that scene is amazing. It's very emotional. Ezra Miller, great job. Just fantastic. The fact that they're able to emote and cry, with basically just CGI, a lot of the times around them all the time, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. But, he puts it back, right? He puts the canned tomatoes back to the shelf, to sort of have the timeline go the way it was supposed to be, right? And that's so mature, and I love that. I love that when I watched that in the movie theater, because I was like, the most simple fucking thing, putting canned tomatoes in the cart and then getting it back and putting it on the shelf. That timeline of just the canned tomatoes fucking in the shopping cart and then going back, that simple thing, just threw off everything. Oh my God, just amazing, brilliant, right? But he puts them back. But he moves he moves the whole shelf, the whole canned tomatoes shelf that his dad was gonna get. He moves that up top, right? On the top shelf. Because the whole thing is the camera, when his dad went to go get the tomatoes, of course, the canned tomatoes, the camera was filming him, but that was the only evidence that they could have used to support that his dad could not have been liable for the death of his mom, because he was there at the grocery store. But the camera did not get his face, so they weren't able to prove that it was him. But in this case, when the Flash goes back in time and he puts those canned tomatoes up top, it makes his character look up at the camera, and he wears the same outfit that his father wears. And I didn't get this at the time, actually. But, everything goes back to normal. He goes back to his timeline, and his dad is saved because the new evidence showed apparently it just somehow worked, right? And then the movie basically ends with him being released from jail, and that just completely destroys everything because, oh my fucking God. You go through the whole fucking film learning how going back in time and fixing things in the past fucks things over. That's number one. But even if it doesn't fuck it over, you're not supposed to do that. It's not honest, at the end of the day. It's not right because you're fucking everyone else up too. It's not just you. It's very selfish, right? But he does this to save himself in the future with his dad, so he can see his dad and his dad can be freed. The whole fucking time when he's doing this in the first, act of the film, the second act of the film, there's consequences to this. There are severe consequences, right? And especially in the third half of the film, there are consequences. And when he does this and things go back to normal, the only consequence is we get fucking George Clooney as Batman in this world. And that's the consequence. That's like a little gag thing of the only thing you have to deal with is George Clooney as Batman because everyone fucking hated that shit. And that's the joke, and that's the one thing that changed. It's like, what the fuck, dude? It just felt like such a slap in the face. I get it. This is a comic book film. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be, it's just fun. It's comic book fun. It's not nothing serious, but it's also like, you spent this entire time really building up the story and making it really emotional and really teaching this character of the Flash a really important lesson through, this time travel thing and just learning about impertinence, right? Is that what it is? Impertinence is just not the idea that you're not here forever, right? Like that. That's sort of just learning that you have to let things go, and there's these things that build up that metaphor, with him doing his homework and his mom in his past telling him, sometimes there are no solutions to a problem. You gotta let it go, all this shit. And then he fucking ends up still saying, fuck that, I'm gonna be selfish and save my dad in the future by doing this very thing and fucking things up again. But the only consequence is we get George Clooney. So it's like, the story, it's like the writers manipulated the story. It's like, and that's not what storytelling is supposed to be. Storytelling is supposed to live on its own in many ways. There are supposed to be rules and logistics that work in your story that are sort of detracted from your own bias when you're writing it, right? You can't just manipulate shit to get what you want, because again, the first half, second half of the story, we got real consequences for Barry Allen fucking with the timeline. And then we have this third act where he fucks with the timeline to get what he wants again, and it's all good. And the consequence is fun. It's not fucked up anymore. That's just fucked up, man. That's not right. That's not right. I fucking hated that shit, and that's what overall killed me. My girlfriend told me about this shit. I was like, oh, like he looked at the camera, and that's what did it. You know, he didn't really actually, you know, change the fucking shelf, and he didn't like, nobody did. It's just fucked. And that's why the story overall sucks for me. That very end thing, because that was the thing that was supposed to culminate everything together. Can you imagine had they not done that and had Barry just go back and his dad is still in jail? Yeah, it's a sad story. It's still sad. It doesn't end in, you know, fucking George Clooney happy ass and Barry Allen's dad is not fucking freed. Like, yeah, it doesn't end that way. But it's so much more real and so much more mature and sophisticated. And we still got funny ass moments and we still had all these cameos and shit. But we didn't get that. We got something that was just, you know, it was like, no. He's still not, no, he didn't learn his lesson, but it's okay. It's like, what the fuck did you just spend? I just spent all this time watching this film, watching him develop as a character, and then this happens? You did not close the story right. You didn't do it. You fucked it up. The next thing that I want to talk about are the cameos, the multiverse cameos. And this goes in line sort of with my gripes with the story a little bit, in the sense of they fucked it up. Well, they fucked it up here too, in the sense of there's a lot of cameos here. They all look like shit because they're all CGI. I will give them props because they included Nicolas Cage and the story of the spider, Tim Burton's Superman fighting the spider, Kevin Smith's story. I love that. That's brilliant. That is so meta. That is so cool. But here's the thing. Here's the fucking thing. All these fucking cameos, you know, even with Christopher Reeves, all of these are fucking meaningless. It's literally just like a pan, like a zoom out pan of the multiverse, and you just see all these things that are occurring. And it's like, oh, here's the world where Christopher Reeve's Superman is in, and this is theirs, and it's like, this doesn't say anything. This doesn't tell me anything. It was literally just there for fan service. There was no depth. There's no meaning, unlike Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, where the multiverse aspect of the film and the cameo aspect of the film are, number one, there are the cameos are literal characters, fundamental characters in the film that do shit, that help the main characters. That's number one. But also number two, the multiverse aspect of that story is fundamental to the narrative and to the lessons learned, you know, by the characters, and that whole essence of like, oh, like it's a canon event, you know, all these things happen to all these characters and it's important. And if you fuck it up here, you fuck it up for everyone else, and there are stakes involved, right? If you fuck up with canon events for one character's timeline, it fucks everyone else up, and you see that, and you understand it, right? You understand it. I mean, you don't see it entirely, right? But like, you do understand it because you have some connections with all these different Spider-Men, and it's not just a gimmick, these cameos. Unlike here with The Flash, it's all just for fan service. We're not seeing how fucking up, you know, things in the past fuck up everyone else, or, you know, you don't see that. You don't see the effect. So I don't care. I don't fucking care if I see Christopher Reeve or Nicolas Cage. I don't care. It's just cool, I guess. It does nothing. It did nothing. So fuck that. And fuck you, DC. God, I'm so fucking passionate. No, it just makes me mad. It just makes me mad when I see something that could have been so great and it wasn't. Dude, the Flashpoint Paradox animated film is so much better. Going back in time in the movie was cool. It's not as cool as Zack Snyder's Justice League. When the Flash goes back in time there. And it's simply because here in the movie, he goes back in time all the time. So it's not as impactful. That's the whole thing, right? Is if you do something over and over again, it's just not as cool. It's like awesome think about it in real life, if you had the power to go back in time. It'd be cool to do it. Do it once, it's awesome. But if you keep doing it again and again and again, there are consequences, number one. But number two, it's just not as impactful, right? And the meaning gets lost. It's sort of, you know, kind of like addiction. You do it once, you get high and it's great. and then you start doing it again and again, and then you start going into diminishing returns. And that's what you see here, is where they're going back in time, and it's like, it's pretty cool. I get it. It's the mechanic of the Flash. I get it. So it's pretty interesting, and it's cool to see how to play out. And it was really cool, specifically in the Man of Steel sequence when they're fighting Zod and they're fighting Feora, and Supergirl, she's supposed to die, and Michael Keaton's supposed to die, and things are not supposed to end well. And it just, no matter how many times he goes back in time and tries to do things differently, it's a canon event, bro. Like, the same shit ends up happening. I thought that was really cool, just seeing it over and over and over again. I thought that was cool. Maybe that's what it is. It's Zack Snyder was just able to make going back in time for the Flash much more impactful in Zack Snyder's Justice League when he was doing it, because he only did it like once or twice, essentially. He did it a mini time and then once at the very end that, really just, it was the final thing. It was the thing that saved everyone. It was brilliant. Here, it's like, it's just not as impactful. I guess whether it's because of the way that it was done or how many times it was done, but that's how I feel. The action was cool, the action sequences for sure, especially Michael Keaton's actually really, really awesome. Supergirl's was cool too. The Flash, when he was doing it, great stuff. The sort of on the third act of the film, when they're in the desert, and Supergirl and the Flash and his doppelganger are fighting the Kryptonians and Zod. It's cool. It's pretty interesting the way they do it. But again, it's doing that, doing that fucking thing that, a lot of superhero films do, a lot of superhero films that don't have a lot of substance, is they put a lot of, licensed music in it, not an actual score. They put a bunch of fucking, fun music in there just to make it more poppy, and more popcorny. And it's just not as effective. It isn't as taking things more seriously and using a score and really, kind of taking the reins of your story and really being like, this is my story. I'm going to make it have its own identity, not going to use other things to make it more fun or poppy, or whatever. I think really the biggest problem is that there's just no stakes. There's no stakes involved, like at all. Specifically because they're fighting in the desert. I mean, it's just, I don't care. This is maybe effective in a comic book film, this is maybe effective in an animated film, whatever. I don't know. But like in a real live action, and you're trying to tell these really serious, strong stories and you're trying to really move someone, it doesn't hit. There's no stakes, they're just fighting in a desert. It's whatever. I could care less, but the action's great. Yeah. Just not as effective. And that's really why Zack Snyder's films and his take on the characters are effective, because there are stakes. You do care. It affects people. It affects things, And, yes, you did have the Doomsday fight in Batman v Superman in a fucking remote island, of course. And you had to do that at that point, because my God, had you not done that. But, there were stakes involved. Someone died. Yeah, Michael Keaton, he does die. So, yeah, maybe I'm being hypocritical. Yes, he dies. It was heartfelt. I thought it was well done. Overall, I didn't really care for a lot of these action sequences at the end of the day, even though they were well done and well made. I'm also a hypocrite. Kill me. I will say this. Sasha Calle, Supergirl, was probably my second favorite aspect of the film besides Ezra Miller's portrayal of the Flash. She was great. I mean, my God. Just brilliant. I love her. She was literally like a female Henry Cavill. I mean, it was beautiful. It was awesome. She's strong, resilient, but also alluring and mysterious, just like Henry Cavill. And, she's not as, I guess, warm at first and not as comedic. Not to say that Henry Cavill was comedic, but, he had a little bit of a charm to him. She's not that charming in that sense, but it makes sense. I like that there's a difference. I like how she's not exactly like Henry Cavill, but, she does maintain, and this is the first iteration of the character, of course, and we're probably never going to see her again, which is unfortunate, but she has this regal aspect to her that really, it almost feels like she would kick Henry Cavill's ass, which is really interesting. So I loved her. The essence of Snyder's Superman and Snyder's world was really in her, and I could really sense that. So I love that. Also, the fact that she had to be saved in Russia, because, Superman, Red Sun, get it? That was really cool. With these multiverse movies and these multiple cameo character fucking movies, you don't really have time to really develop a lot of people individually. But, it did make sense a little bit why she, initially had some hate for humanity, or had some, just a little bit of like, why should I care about humanity, which makes sense because in many ways, if you become Superman in Russia's Soviet Union, hence the Red Sun story. It makes sense why you would come out a little bit differently. I appreciate that. It was small, but overall, I mean, she was a good person. But it did kind of, story-wise, it was kind of a little bit abrupt because she was a little bit kind of rejecting humanity. And then she just saw Zod, you know, kill like an army guy, and then she was like, oh, fuck that guy. But really, I mean, actually, that's not true, because she ultimately cared about Kal-El. And then when she found out that Zod ended up basically killing, inadvertently, Kal-El, and he didn't really care, and he really ultimately did it to save Krypton, that's when she was like, fuck you, because, you know, her true purpose was to really protect Kal-El. Also, the end credits, absolutely fucking pointless. Just a slap to the face of the character of Aquaman, really, at the end of the day. And I guess timeline-wise, it makes sense, but it's so stupid. It just does nothing. And it makes sense. You know why? Because there's nothing fucking happening after this movie. This is it. This is the fucking end. So, it does make sense. They didn't really fucking have to tease anything in this end credit scene. So yeah, fuck that. Don't waste your time. Just leave the theater. Just leave, because it's awful. And it's a disgrace to Zack Snyder and to the movie itself, because again, the story and everything just, you know, ultimately sucks. I will point out a few things. A lot of people have said, you know, that this movie is a love letter to Zack Snyder's universe and his world of superhero characters. I don't really see that. I think, you know, it has Sasha Calle in there. I think she's really embracing Zack Snyder, her portrayal and her outfit, you know, just really just Zack Snyder really through and through with her, and even her action sequences for sure. But, and just in certain, you know, ways that her action is framed, very similar to Man of Steel. And again, in line with that, Namek, the Kryptonian that is in The Flash, he's also in Man of Steel, of course. He was sort of the left-hand man of Zod. But Namek, it's this one, you know, scene in The Flash where he jumps and he goes through fire, and it's like a direct shot where you just see him jumping, and he jumps right onto the bat plane, right onto the windshield of the bat plane. Very reminiscent of Man of Steel. And it's that same shot where he jumps in front of the camera and he goes through the fire, and he goes through the plane. I love that. Brilliant, nice little homage in there. Hey everyone, so my battery died. Sorry about that. But yeah, I like those little homages. It was nice. At the end of the day, you know, a lot of these characters and a lot of these stories come from Zack Snyder, so it makes sense why they had to do sort of a little bit of these homages. But I love it. It does. In tiny aspects, it does feel like a nice little ribbon seal, you know, like a nice little envelope seal to Zack Snyder's world of DC characters, right, and stories. But overall, I would not say it's a love letter, you know, to Zack Snyder's DC universe at all. The humor in the beginning with Wonder Woman and Ben Affleck's Batman was really cringy and just blech. It reminded me of Justice League, Joss Whedon's Justice League, and that's never a good thing. But yeah, with this being the last, you know, essentially DCEU film, and it'll, you know, sort of end things, and then we go into James Gunn's universe, it's really disappointing. Really disappointed me. Just, again, the story was ultimately bad, even though it was fucking great, you know, leading up to the very end of the film, and just, but that third act, that, you know, that really latter end of that third act, and what Barry Allen did there, going back into the past. He didn't learn his lesson. He fucking did it again, and it just, there's no consequences, no lesson learned, just absolutely awful, and really soured the taste in my mouth for this film. So yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, sure, watch this film, I guess, but if you don't watch it, don't kill yourself. I mean, it's just not, it's a disappointment. It really is. And what's so infuriating is that I was enjoying my time overall up until that fucking last moment, you know, that last story beat, you know, that I talked about. It just, I can't believe it. And that's what really killed it for me. And it's insane. It really shows you just how well you have to craft every single aspect of your story right to the very end. And if you don't fucking nail the landing, it can really fuck up everything, which makes sense. What happened here was you have a plane, and you didn't nail the landing, and fucking it exploded, and everyone died. And the whole trip was a waste. That's what it was. Fuck. But that's it for me. Those are my thoughts on The Flash. Please subscribe if you enjoy this content. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and of course, comment down below if you agree with me or if you disagree with me. I would love to know your thoughts. And please share with your Snyder-loving, Andy Muschietti-loving, Ezra Miller-loving, Flash-loving friends, if you will. But that's it for me. You all take care, stay safe, and until next time, I love you. Bye-bye.